Good evening. It's Wednesday, January 29th. Thanks for joining us tonight. I'm Maya Trabulsi. It's a scene that shows just how serious health officials are taking the coronavirus outbreak. This morning, a chartered plane carrying more than 200 Americans arrived at March Air Reserve Base near Riverside. The group, all diplomats from the U.S. consulate in Wuhan, were greeted by people in white protective suits. All went through several health screenings during their trip, and none show any sign of the virus, which has now killed 170 people in China. And there are 5 confirmed cases here in the U.S., and more tests are being done, including one potential case from San Diego. KPBS science and technology reporter Shalina Chatlani is live downtown, where officials just gave an update. Shalina, what can you tell us?
Thanks, Maya. Yeah, so there's still no results for the San Diego patient here. And that's even though there were expected results yesterday. Now, the question is, what's up with the delay? Well, Eric McDonald for the county's epidemiology and immunization branch here says that the delay could be because there have been a major increase in the number of cases that have gone into the CDC. And it could be that the San Diego patient's case is a lower priority because it's likely that the test will come back negative. But a few things that were emphasized here in the press conference is that the CDC says generally the risk of spread for the American public is low. The symptoms of the coronavirus obviously are much like the flu, and in fact, the San Diego County officials have received 1 to 2 dozen calls for suspicion of patients having the coronavirus, but it's only been the one San Diego patient that's come under investigation. And the reason why is that this coronavirus is based on travel of the patient to China. So what these officials emphasize is that it's important to remember that, risk is low here, and if you are experiencing flu-like symptoms, go to the doctor, call in sick from work, make sure you stay inside, wash your hands, follow procedures. County officials say that they're in constant communication with the CDC to make sure that the situation is being monitored. Maya?
Thanks for that report, Shalina. And the number of new flu cases in San Diego is slowing down. More than 1,800 new cases were reported last week, but that's nearly 400 fewer than the prior week. And overall, San Diego has seen nearly 12,000 lab-confirmed cases. 39 of those turned deadly, including 7 in the past week. A new phase in the impeachment trial. Opening statements are over, and now senators are getting the chance to ask questions, and momentum is building to allow witnesses. Camila Bernal has our update from Washington.
A more visible Chief Justice.
The Senate will convene as
John Roberts, now the voice of senators, as he reads their questions over a 16-hour period.
This is a question for the counsel for the president. Senator Feinstein asks the House managers. The senators ask
House managers and the president's defense lawyers answering the questions and trying to push their cases. The defense saying there's no wrongdoing on behalf of the president and that the House managers have a weak case.
There isn't any legitimate public interest, and they've totally failed to make that case.
The Democrats doing all they can to convince at least 4 Republican senators to vote yes on witnesses like John Bolton, the former national security advisor.
To turn him away, to look the other way, I think is deeply at odds with being an impartial juror.
Each answer allowed approximately 5 minutes.
to the President's counsel.
And the questions coming from one or multiple senators.
On my behalf, and also joined by Senators Loeffler, Lee, Kramer, and McSally.
But after the 2-day round of questions is finished, the senators and perhaps Roberts will finally have to confront a likely difficult vote on whether to call witnesses. Camila Bernal, KPBS News.
Now, as his future was being debated in the Senate, President Trump was celebrating today at the White House. President Trump signed into law the new trade agreement with Mexico and Canada. It was passed last month with large bipartisan support, though no Democrats were invited to today's ceremony. The sweeping new law will bring some help to the San Diego area in the form of millions of dollars to address the cross-border sewage problems. The trade agreement still needs to be approved by Canada to go into effect. And there was a familiar face at today's signing. San Diego Mayor Kevin Faulconer was among the invited guests at the White House. He's a supporter of the new law and has been advocating for cross-border trade and a fix for the sewage issue. Faulconer was also in D.C. last week for the annual Conference of Mayors. Authorities have discovered the longest smuggling tunnel ever found along the U.S. border, stretching more than 3/4 of a mile from Tijuana to San Diego. KPBS reporter Matt Hoffman takes a look inside.
In order to bypass this wall, authorities say traffickers dug the longest cross-border tunnel ever. This is a spot where Border Patrol dug down to actually go inside that tunnel. It stretches all the way from Tijuana, Mexico to Otay Mesa, and it's 70 feet below the surface. Authorities say this tunnel is more than 4,300 feet long, nearly a mile. Inside, it's 5 feet high by 2 feet wide. It's one of the more advanced they've found, complete with a rail system, electricity, ventilation, and even a drainage system.
As efforts to strengthen security on our southern border increase, Mexican cartels are forced underground to smuggle deadly drugs and other contraband into the United States.
The tunnel was found last August by U.S. and Mexican authorities. Border Patrol says the discovery was part of a multi-year investigation.
It wasn't being used when we found it.
And authorities have yet to make any arrests or seizures, but they're confident it was used by smugglers.
In my experience, this is exclusively a drug tunnel.
It's unclear when the tunnel was built. Authorities say it shows how much time and resources cartels will spend to smuggle drugs into the United States.
They're very well funded, and they'll try any means they can to get their illicit cargo into the United States.
Border Patrol isn't ruling out that the tunnel was used for human smuggling, too. It started in Tijuana near an industrial area. On the U.S. side, an exit was discovered near warehouses blocked with sandbags.
The evidence strongly suggests the tunnel was previously operational.
Technology played a role in finding the tunnel, although officials wouldn't elaborate.
Although no arrests or seizures have been made, the investigation is ongoing, and I am confident that the task force will aggressively pursue the criminals connected to this tunnel.
Matt Hoffman, KPBS News.
The new border wall was no match for wind in the Imperial Valley today. This is along the border with Calexico and Mexicali. Border officials say concrete around the panels hadn't cured, and today's wind was strong enough to knock them over. No one was hurt, but some trees on the Mexico side were knocked over. Immigrant advocates and lawyers gathered in downtown San Diego today to mark the first anniversary of the Remain in Mexico program. Immigrants say they face persecution and danger while waiting for their claims to be reviewed, and it's almost impossible to find legal help in Mexico. One of them was Gabriela, who says she and her son spent more than 6 months waiting in Tijuana before the government terminated her asylum claim without notifying her. She says she was returned to Tijuana with nothing and with no guidance from the government.
Y me dijo, mami, ¿ahora qué hacemos? No teníamos familia en Tijuana, no teníamos a nadie que pudiera irnos a recoger.
My son asked me, Mom, what comes next? We had no family in Tijuana. We had no one that could go pick us up.
More than 60,000 asylum seekers have been sent back to Mexico under the program. It is currently being challenged in federal court. Amid a backlash over so-called smart streetlights, San Diego City Council members are moving to craft a city law to regulate surveillance technology. 3 years ago, the city started installing streetlights equipped with cameras intending to measure traffic patterns. But in 2018, the police started using footage from the cameras to investigate crimes. At a Public Safety Committee meeting today, Councilwoman Monica Montgomery said there's no denying the cameras can help catch criminals.
However, allowing surveillance technology to show up in our neighborhoods unannounced and uncontrolled will further erode trust between our communities, our city officials, and our law enforcement agencies.
Committee members rejected a proposed policy that would regulate the streetlight usage. Instead, Montgomery says she'll craft an ordinance that will also regulate drones, facial recognition software, and all other kinds of surveillance technology. One of UC's longest-running labor disputes appears to be over. A historic deal between patient care workers has been reached and now needs approval of the union's membership. The agreement includes wage and benefit increases and enforceable limits on UC's ability to outsource service jobs to private contractors. walking out over wages. Late this afternoon, teachers in Chula Vista staged a walkout over pay and class size. KPBS reporter Joe Hong was there with them.
Teachers and parents demonstrated across Chula Vista Elementary School District today. They're protesting a district's proposal that could increase class sizes to pay for teacher raises. Meg Rabine is a teacher at Clearview Elementary School. She says bigger class sizes would mean less individual attention for students.
Instruction alone, it will hurt in the primary grades getting reading instruction or the things that they need in small group, because we will have to manage more students. So it'd be less time with those students to invest in them.
District administrators say these changes would be necessary to offset the cost of staff pensions and growing special education costs. Negotiations between the union and the district continue Thursday. Joe Hong, KPBS News.
If you're near downtown tonight, keep an eye on the County Administration Building. It will be in purple and gold in remembrance of Kobe Bryant. In other areas, it's going to be windy tonight. Justin Povic has our forecast.
Now, more mild temperatures on the way right into the start of the weekend. Gusty winds, those are going to be a concern, especially if you're traveling over some of the higher terrain, perhaps out east along the 8 or 78 here from Escondido, points on off toward the east. Dry conditions, I'll talk about those temperatures coming up as well, and even a bigger change as we head into early next week. But no precipitation to talk about right now. That's all located well off to the north here into the corner of the country. Big dip in the jet stream, though. Winds switching direction from the south to the north, and those will be feisty here along even portions of the 5 as we work our way right into late tonight. This will continue right into Thursday as well, especially out from the coast. Strong crosswinds are concerned, as I mentioned, especially if you're traveling west to east. Gusts of 40 to 50 going to be a possibility, especially, say, around Mount Laguna. In the AccuWeather, the local storm max of 65 miles per hour. Wind advisories out, Oceanside to San Diego. Again, as we talk about the daytime hours today, but continuation of those right into Friday as we head on off toward the east, toward Borrego Springs and northbound, where they turn into high wind warnings around Riverside. Some of the gusts here can exceed 10, 15, even close to 20 miles per hour San Diego, but Mount Laguna 40, perhaps even greater than 50 miles per hour. Again, coming down again from the north. So we'll talk about the 40s for tonight. San Diego, Ramona dropping down to 39 degrees. 35 goes to 55 toward Mount Laguna, but still some of those gusty winds in place. Again, coming down from the north, so beware of those crosswinds that we'll have. Coastal zones, check it out. Temperatures continue mild right into the start of the weekend. Another digging piece of energy. Big trough coming in, cools us off Sunday into Monday. Similar situation inland. Of course, the breeze is still gusty here Thursday, beginning to taper on Friday. There's our warmth before the next piece of energy dives in and cools us off substantially by Monday. Look at the mountain forecast here. We're going to be talking about the 30s by the time we venture into early next week. For KPBS News, I'm meteorologist Justin Povic. Back to you.
Our special coverage of the primary election continues tonight. In 2016, voters rejected a hotel tax hike to build a new football stadium downtown. Now there's a similar proposal to expand the convention center expansion, to fix roads, and to help the homeless. Eric Anderson has more on Measure C.
Hello, my name is Jesse Garcia. I'm a proud member of the Carpenters Union, Local 619, and I support Yes for a Better San Diego. Thank you.
The Yes on Measure C kickoff event happened across the street from the San Diego Convention Center last December.
Good morning. My name is Frank Balea with the International Union of Elevator Constructors, Local 18, and I support Yes for a Better San Diego.
Tourism officials, politicians, and union workers hailed the potential economic windfall of a new hotel tourist tax that could raise billions. The money would go for convention center expansion, homeless programs, and street repairs.
Really, the coalition, I've been involved in a lot of campaigns and ballot measures. I have never seen a more diverse and stronger coalition that cuts across all portions of San Diego, because we need this funding source. We need a permanent source of funding for homeless services. We need to expand our convention center and the dollars this will need for road improvement. These are the issues that San Diegans care about.
Faulkner has long pushed for a convention center expansion, but several attempts to make it happen in recent years have failed. Just getting this measure on the ballot stumbled 2 years ago when the first petition drive didn't collect enough valid signatures. Faulkner says the city deserves this redo.
It's the first time that it's actually going to be on the ballot, and I think that's why you're seeing so much enthusiasm.
Measure C asks voters to boost the city's hotel room tax between 1.25% to 3.25%, depending on how close a hotel is to the convention center.
Which is a tax that visitors pay when they come to stay in San Diego and they stay in one of our hotels.
Carol Kim sits on the convention center board and works for the Building and Construction Trades Council. She says the tax hike would raise more than $6 billion over the next 4 decades, and the tax hike doesn't expire.
We're telling voters up front, we're saying we're not just going to raise this tax and let anybody do what they want with it. We're going to raise this tax and spend it specifically on 3 things, 3 specific buckets: the convention center expansion, homelessness, streets and roads.
But that plan doesn't sit well with everyone. Community advocate Donna Fry says people have to remember they're voting on a new tax, and they're getting only limited input on where the money will go.
If you had $1 billion in new tax revenue, do you think the best use of that would be to expand a convention center? Or do you think that it should be used for other purposes?
Fry says people should not be misled. The bulk of the money raised by the hotel tax, 59%, will pay for the convention center expansion and then the operation of the facility. Fry says that's a huge tax subsidy.
What they've done is they've tried to combine it. The hotel guys have tried to combine it with homelessness and roads and make it sound like it's really for homeless people and for roads, when there is no guarantee. There is absolutely nothing in the measure that says any housing will be built for the homeless.
The measure doesn't outline how any of the money raised for homelessness will be spent. Instead, it relies on the city council to decide whether it will fund services or housing or some combination of the two. San Diego Tax Fighters founder Richard Ryder says San Diego already has too many taxes on the books, and he's not a fan of bundling issues together.
Levy a tax, let the voters decide on that tax based on what it is being used for. If we're going to have a separate tax for the homeless, okay, put a separate tax for the homeless on the ballot. Don't try to fool people into thinking this will pay for everything. It won't.
Ryder says the tax will create billions in new revenue for the city, but he worries city officials are playing a shell game. By creating dedicated revenue streams for the convention center, homelessness, and road repair, the city frees up general fund money.
We spend a tremendous and ever-increasing amount of our money on pensions. So when we spend more money on the homeless here, it frees up money for what government's #1 priority is, which is paying for the pensions and retiree health care.
Because Measure C is a dedicated tax increase, the ballot measure needs a 2/3 majority vote to pass. If approved, the initiative would raise the hotel tax rate and allow the city to borrow money for the convention center expansion. Eric Anderson, KPBS News.
In the race for Congress, Scott Peters is going for a 5th term. His Democratic challenger sees the environment as an opening. Amita Sharma looks at the matchup in the 52nd District.
Peters says he appreciates the enthusiasm that the proposed Green New Deal has generated. The plan strives to get the U.S. economy off of fossil fuels and create lucrative jobs in clean energy. But Peters doesn't support it because he says the deal does nothing to build a consensus with Republicans. That's why fellow Democrat and California Food and Agricultural Board member Nancy Cassidy is challenging Peters for his 52nd congressional seat. UC San Diego political scientist Thad Kauser says Cassidy's goal is a long shot.
Even though the progressive left is becoming a stronger and stronger voice within the Democratic Party, it would still be incredibly surprising if a popular incumbent in a fairly moderate seat is ousted by a liberal.
Peters faces 2 other challengers, public finance banker Ryan Cunningham and Republican businessman Jim DeBello. With a 35,000 Democratic voter advantage, Kauser says the 52nd congressional district is no longer competitive.
Donald Trump has really changed the image of the Republican Party, made it much less friendly to California voters, and it's very hard for any Republican candidate to escape the shadow of Donald Trump right now.
The district stretches across much of coastal San Diego County. Amita Sharma, KPBS News.
San Diego's Board of Supervisors has long been a conservative body, but that could change as another seat is likely to turn blue. Taryn Mento looks at the race unfolding in the South Bay.
The birds and squirrels on San Diego's side of the Tijuana River are soaked with Mexico's polluted water nearly every time it rains. The flow brings trash, closes beaches, and County Supervisor candidate Rafael Castellanos says residents are sick of it.
We're getting dumped on, literally, in South San Diego County.
Castellanos is campaigning to change that. He's one of the 3 leading Democratic candidates jostling to replace the current Republican supervisor who is terming out after more than 20 years. Castellanos says a top priority will be curbing the cross-border sewage that has made federal employees sick. The real estate attorney wants to spend county reserve funds to begin development on sewage control projects that officials have already identified.
County can just move forward with those projects and can seek reimbursement from the federal government, including in court if necessary.
He wants the county to sue the federal government by joining lawsuits that have been filed by local cities, the state, and the San Diego Unified Port District, where he's a commissioner. Castellanos believes the legal action has resulted in $300 million in federal funds that were recently made available for cross-border pollution. But because it's unclear what projects or which border that will go toward, he says San Diego needs to keep the pressure on.
We have to take advantage of all of the tools in our toolbox, legal and otherwise.
His opponent, Nora Vargas, says diplomacy is better for that problem, and resources should be focused elsewhere.
What we need are the basic resources that our communities need to be able to provide health care for our communities.
South Bay communities have some of the worst healthcare access in the state. Vargas says she has personal experience with this problem. Pointing to photos of her late mother in the hallway of her Chula Vista home, she says her mom was denied Medicaid while battling cancer before the Affordable Care Act was approved.
That feeling of hopelessness, I never want anybody else to feel.
The former Planned Parenthood executive and president of Southwestern Community College's governing board says she's looking at using reserve funds to better support community health groups and expand outreach efforts to enroll more people in public programs, including the state's Medicaid program known as Medi-Cal.
Because I've done this work, and I know that when people from our communities are out there sharing what resources are available, people will make sure that they have access to them.
Castellanos says he too wants to boost enrollment in public programs that bring reimbursements. And he also plans to tap reserves to add more staff to do that work.
We need to prioritize this in the budget, and that really comes down to making sure that we have the right number of people, that they're not burnt out, that they're properly staffed, working on helping to enroll people into these programs.
And while Castellanos is focused on water pollution, Vargas says she's looking at air quality.
Try to make more people out of their cars, but we can't do that unless we have better transportation, right? We have to make sure that we create initiatives. Like, I really do believe that everybody should be able to ride a bus for free.
They're both concerned about the housing problem that exists countywide. Castellanos put forth a 4-point plan that calls for cutting regulatory hurdles and includes a $1 billion bond to offset infrastructure costs that he says developers pass on to buyers and renters.
It's based on my experience as a land use and real estate and finance attorney.
Vargas hasn't proposed a formal plan, but says she supports building more homes and wants to help keep people in the ones they already have.
And I think the county can create a tenant rights part of their housing authority.
The other leading candidate is State Senator Ben Hueso.
We need good leadership, good government, to represent the interests of the people locally.
He canceled an interview with KPBS and did not respond to follow-up messages, but he told the San Diego Union Tribune editorial board that quality of life was San Diego's biggest issue.
What do they want? They want to have clean beaches. They want to have jobs, quality jobs.
Hueso is second in the money race. He raised just over $200,000, while Castellanos raised $450,000. Vargas is third with around $150,000, but she still has a few more days to file details of additional contributions. The 3 were invited to a forum next week, but Hueso declined. Castellanos and Vargas will be joined at the forum by a 4th Democrat, Sofia Rodriguez, who has received about $7,000 in contributions. Taryn Mento, KPBS News.
And one Republican in the race, Alex Galicia, was unable to provide an interview by deadline. Tomorrow, we'll have a focus on East County, where voters will choose a new county supervisor to replace Diane Jacob. All of our election coverage can be found at kpbs.org and our KPBS podcasts.
I'm Judy Woodruff. Tonight on the NewsHour, senators question the prosecution and the defense in the impeachment trial of President Trump. Coming up at 7, right after Evening Edition on KPBS.
A few years ago, the San Diego City Council made it easier to build granny flats on existing property and made it illegal to use them as short-term vacation rentals. iNewsSource investigative reporter Cody Delaney found the city isn't enforcing the law.
Council members were clear when they voted in 2017 to ease regulations on granny flats. The changes were supposed to provide affordable housing for San Diegans. Here's what council members said leading up to that vote.
These new companion units have to be rented for at least 30 days, and that is to ensure that they do not become short-term vacation rentals.
This is supposed to be for housing, not vacation rentals.
But iNewsSource used the city's own records to show that staff allowed it to happen at least 7 times. And that only represents property owners who pay room taxes on their granny flats. The actual number could be much higher. Bree recently told iNewsSource the city has to do better. For KPBS, I'm iNewsSource investigative reporter Cody Delaney.
iNewsSource is an independently funded nonprofit partner of KPBS. And here's a look at what we're working on for tomorrow in the KPBS newsroom. On Morning Edition, we'll have a look at this year's Black Film Festival, which kicks off tonight. A reminder that the impeachment trial is changing some KPBS programming. KPBS Midday Edition will air at 9 a.m. on KPBS Radio during the course of the trial. You can follow impeachment coverage live on all of our KPBS platforms. Thanks for joining us tonight. Have a great evening.